generations to come.
And welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Thoroughbred Daily News Writers Room podcast. My name is Bill Finley. I'm a correspondent for the Thoroughbred Daily News, also co-host the Down the Stretch show with the legendary Dave Johnson on Saturday mornings on SiriusXM.
I'm Randy Moss with NBC Sports and the Buyer Speed Figure team. Lucy is down here on the floor below me. She's got a new position this week.
TD Thornton speaking to you from a little north of Boston. I am a stablemate of Bill's on the writing team at TDN.
So, guys, we didn't have the big, huge weekend last week that we had with the Belmont. Relatively quiet time in racing, but there was some interesting horses to talk about. And I want to start off with the latest TDN Rising Star. And no surprise, it is Muth, who on Sunday at Santa Anita, first-time starter by Good Magic, that cost $2 million at OBS, won quite easily in its debut for Amir Zidane. And, this is a guy, you spend $2 million on a horse and you think it might be easy, but it's not easy. So many of these horses don't pan out. And yet Zidane, he keeps spending this big money and he keeps producing stars. Arabian Lion, $600,000. Arabian Knight, who still has a lot more to prove because he's only run in the two races, $2.3 million. It seems like this team for Baffert is really, hitting the mark more than missing. I also thought it was interesting that a day earlier, Baffert ran another very highly, there was lots of touts on for Miramati. And he ran this horse as a first-time starter in the Fasig-Tipton Futurity, named, of course, for Frank Miramati, the announcer at Santa Anita, will soon be coming to Saratoga. This is a $1.05 million Keeneland September purchase. This one wasn't any good. He was second, beaten 7 1/4 lengths by a big long shot. So I thought it was interesting that Baffert chose the better horse to run in a maiden race than the horse that he ran in the stakes race. But nonetheless, here we go again. No surprise. $2 million horse, Bob Baffert, Amir Zidane. We'll be keeping our eyes on Muth as we go through the year.
Yeah, no surprise that a Bob Baffert first-time starter is 1-5 on the board at Santa Anita. And he ran like it. I mean, as you pointed out, you would think logic would say that if you spend $2 million on a horse at a 2-year-old in training sale, you would almost be guaranteed that the horse would be an absolutely kick-ass 2-year-old. But it doesn't necessarily always pan out that way. But Muth got an 87 Buyer Speed Figure, one geared down. I know that phrase is used probably a little too often. It's overused, but this one really was geared down and won as easily as you could win. So it's going to be pretty exciting to see how he runs. For me, guys, the 3 best 2-year-olds, I know it's early, obviously, we're just in June. The 3 best 2-year-olds that I've seen so far, Muth, American Rascal, who will run at Royal Ascot this week for Wesley Ward, and then a horse of Brad Cox's called You Almost Had Me, who is 2 for 2, wide margins, won the Kentucky Juvenile at Churchill Downs, and beat the horse who beat Miramati. So those 3 look the best to me, but Muth is going to take a lot of beating, TD.
The thing with me for Muth is not how he finished up, but when was the last time you saw a horse in a 5-furlong race, a 2-year-old, open up by 6 lengths the first quarter mile into the race? I mean, that is just blazing early speed. And I thought it was kind of neat. You could hear, even though it was a Sunday afternoon at Santa Anita, not a huge crowd going on there, but you could hear in the race replay the crowd saying "Muth, Muth, Muth" in the background. It really kind of sounded pretty neat. And Bill, to your point about Miramati not being any good, I mean, that's a relative term. Any other horse comes out, runs second in his debut like that. Granted, he got beat at 3-5. You'd have to say that was an okay effort, but the bar is high with those high price tags and with the Baffert trainees.
Yeah, exactly. If he was a $30,000 maiden trained by the 19th leading trainer in the standings, you'd say, oh, what a promising debut. But that's the way it is with Bob. But I don't give up on Miramati. He certainly deserves more of a chance. Okay, so now I want to turn back to the 3-year-old division. And, what we saw coming out of the Belmont, we had the 3 different Triple Crown winners. So we're all trying to now figure out who's going to step up and be the horse of the second half. And on paper, it didn't look like a huge deal. The Pegasus Stakes at Monmouth, which is a prep for the Haskell. But it drew a pretty interesting field, and there was a couple stories that came out of that. First of all, Kings Barnes went off at 1-2 as the favorite in there, and you can understand why. The Louisiana Derby winner, trained by Pletcher, he finished up poorly in the Kentucky Derby, but he was caught up in that ridiculously fast pace and was just fried on the front end. So, is Kings Barnes going to graduate and win the Pegasus, and then I assume would go next in the Haskell, and is he going to be a big deal in there? He finished second at 1-2 and had absolutely no excuse. If I were the Connections, I would not be that pleased with the outcome. The winner was a horse trained by Brad Cox by the name of Salute the Stars, who had just broken one allowance race at his prior start. Started off on the turf, is now 2 for 2 on the dirt. And, again, I don't know who he beat. I don't know where this horse is going, but he was really good. Take a look at this race if you hadn't yet. He got a really bad start. He was ranked down the backstretch. At the about the 3/16 pole, it looked like he didn't have any chance whatsoever. He dug in, got by Kings Barnes. He's trained by Brad Cox. You see a lot of Brad Cox horses take some time to develop. I'm wondering if we might be talking a lot more about this horse come Haskell Travers time.
I think one of the things that surprised me about that race was how certain Kings Barnes looked at the 8th pole. In the initial stages, I thought perhaps they were going to teach him to try to get him to rate a little bit. He was off the pace, but he wasn't that far off of it. He was pressing a horse who was out there on the front end. But when Kings Barnes was set down, he did open up and Salute the Stars. It was kind of an out of nowhere move inside the 8th pole. If you had in-race betting, if you had a wager and you had the ability to do that, you probably would be getting some nice odds on Salute the Stars for the way he finished up there.
Yeah, look, there were 6 horses in the field in the Pegasus. Salute the Stars got by far the worst trip of any of those 6 horses. Not just the start. He was ranked 4 wide first turn. And as like you pointed out, TD, I had him about 4.5 to 5 lengths behind. Coming to the 8th pole. I mean, what kind of shot, would a horse typically have in a situation like that? Now, I do think part of it was Salute the Stars and part of it was Kings Barnes shortening stride there at the last part of the race. And I kind of wonder exactly how good these 3-year-olds are going to be going forward. But hey, it's Brad Cox's world right now. We're all living in it when it comes to the 3-year-olds. He seems to have a new good 3-year-old just pop out of the woodwork every couple of weeks or so now.
Yeah, so keep an eye on Salute the Stars, and we'll see how the field shapes up for the Haskell. One other race I wanted to mention, and it wasn't necessarily a big deal. It's not even a graded stakes race, but the Monomoy Girls Stakes at Ellis Park with the Churchill meet came up really interesting. You had Wet Paint, who was the beaten favorite in the Kentucky Oaks for Brad Cox. And he had Hoosier Philly, and we all know her story. She was so impressive as a 2-year-old. There was all this hype. There was talk of running her in the Kentucky Derby. And she came out in her first 2 starts this year, and she really didn't look good. Didn't look like the horse at all that was so impressive last year. But then she showed some signs of life, and the Black Eyed Susans ran second. So now she goes in the Ellis Park race, the Monomoy Girl, and Hoosier Philly wins. Gets her first win since last November in the Goldenrod Stakes. Now, there's 2 ways to look at it. She absolutely romped. I mean, she looked terrific in the stretch. She was under wraps by the jockey Morales. But boy, did she get an easy trip on the lead. 25.23, 48.86. So I don't know how much of that was because of the pace or how much of it, the way she looked crossing the wire, was that maybe she is back. I have no idea what might have happened to her. I don't normally think this is a very valid excuse, but perhaps she just hated the track at the fairgrounds because those 2 races she ran so poorly did happen there. Tom Amoss is a great guy, was part of the Fox broadcast, and I know there was a lot of enthusiasm for this horse earlier on the year. It'd be neat to see if she comes back and is a major player in the division after all.
Yeah, as you said, that there's visually and then there's analytically. Visually, this was the Hoosier Filly that we saw as a 2-year-old, and this was why people were so excited about her when she turned 3. The way when she wins is just in devastating fashion, and she just gallops across the wire and looks like she could run a whole heck of a lot faster if she needed to. Doesn't always happen that way, of course, as any handicapper knows. So visually, that was Hoosier Philly, and she was back. But analytically, as you pointed out, the opening quarter mile in 25.23 seconds, a half in 48.4. It not only helped Hoosier Philly to be on the early lead in those fractions, it hurt Wet Paint because of her running style, typically last to first. So it was kind of a double-edged sword there. It's nice to see Hoosier Philly back, but as far as how far back she's going to get, I think the jury is still out just because of the base on balls that you basically had in this race from a pace perspective.
And not only the crawling first quarter mile fraction in that race, but don't forget, with this stakes race being moved, the Churchill entire meet being moved over to Ellis Park, you run those mile races out of that quirky chute they have, similar to the Wilson chute at Saratoga that starts, abutting up near the home stretch at the first turn. So I think that also helped Hoosier Philly. And I agree with Randy, the visuals there turning for home. You see Hoosier Philly in hand and in command. Wet Paint being scrubbed on. Wet Paint was really up against it, trying to rally from last into that type of a situation.
So we are recording this on a Tuesday afternoon. It's 12:06 in the East Coast. So we have only a few races in from Royal Ascot, and then the way our schedule works when this is put out to the public, we're going to have to skip over Wednesday. So we're going to have to kind of do the Royal Ascot and a little bit of this and a little bit of that and here and there. We'll come back next week and I think give you a full wrap up. But Randy, TD and I are not big European racing experts, so we are going to call upon your expertise. As of now, on Tuesday, after the first few races, what have been the big stories at Royal Ascot?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, I know we can't really get into it in depth until next week, but this is what the whole racing world talks about this week, right? I mean, 25% of all of the Group 1 races in the UK are run during this 5-day period at Royal Ascot from Tuesday to Saturday. Typically, we'll see several horses from Royal Ascot show up in the Breeders' Cup races in the fall. We've got 4 Breeders' Cup Challenge Win You're In races run at Royal Ascot. Some top American horses, especially the 2-year-olds from Wesley Ward. American Rascal that I mentioned is going to run later this week, Thursday actually, in the Norfolk Stakes. So a lot to look forward to. And as far as what we've seen so far today, Tuesday as we tape this, the meet kicks off with the Queen Anne. And Modern Games, who we're all familiar with, was a heavy favorite in there, an even money favorite in the American betting market, finished 4th with no excuses. It really makes you think he's better over here when he gets a chance to run around turns than he is, even though he's a Group 1 winner over there when they run down the straightaway. It was a horse no one could have picked on paper, named Triple Time, that wound up being the upset winner there. The King's Stand had some controversy. Should there be a DQ? Should there not be a DQ? That was the 5 furlong sprint race on the turf. Bradsell and Highfield Princess came down to the wire together. We'll talk about that next week. Fascinating difference between the way stewards in the UK look at a race and stewards in the US. And then the last one I saw, the St. James's Palace Stakes, the English 2,000 guineas winner versus the Irish 2,000 guineas winner. And as is often the case at Royal Ascot and everywhere, Aidan O'Brien comes out on top there with the Irish 2,000 guineas winner as Paddington beats Chaldean and Frankie Dettori pretty convincingly. So Royal Ascot already off to a tremendous start. You can watch it on Peacock. You can watch it on NBC Saturday. You can watch it on FanDuel TV, the former TVG. And it's a great watch because you can, in the morning, you can get up and you can have your Starbucks and you can have a little breakfast. You can watch the best horses in the world run. And then you got the rest of the day to do whatever you want to do.
Right. So, Randy, even I will be interested in the Norfolk Stakes on Thursday because, I care. I just, and I'm not trying to be snide or anything, but I follow American racing and I root for American horses. And we are going to see American Rascal in there. And that was a horse by Curlin, trained by Wesley Ward, who broke his maiden at Keeneland by 10 1/4 lengths. And he doesn't look like one of those Wesley Ward 4.5 furlong horses that might go on to win some turf sprints down the line. He looks like, based on his pedigree, that he could be a potential Kentucky Derby horse. No Name Metz, who was owned by Alex Bregman of the Houston Astros, but was sold in the Goff's London sale prior to the night before Royal Ascot for £800,000. He's the horse that won one of those win and you're in races at Gulfstream for the Royal Ascot races. But I see the favorite is a horse by the name of Elite Status, who's a European-based horse, 2 for 2, a listed winner. Give us your thoughts on the Norfolk Stakes, and then tell us about any other highlights and races you're looking forward to between Thursday and Saturday of the Royal Ascot meet.
Well, I mean, to me, the interesting thing about the Norfolk Stakes, because we're Americans, is American Rascal out of Lady Aurelia, who, of course, was Stone Street. This is bred and owned by Stone Street as well. Lady Aurelia was a 2-time Royal Ascot winner, and there are a lot of parallels there. Lady Aurelia won her debut on April 21st of 2016 at Keeneland, won it very impressively. We don't do buyer speed figures for the 4.5 furlong 2-year-old races, but if you want to ballpark it, you'd be talking like about a 93 or a 94 buyer for a first-time starter 2-year-old filly in April. And then American Rascal on April 20th, one day later, 7 years later, 2023, wins at Keeneland by 10 in a 4.5 furlong race. Now, TD, what I'm concerned about the most, though, it's not the Lady Aurelia side of it. It's the Curlin side of it on turf. Curlin won 7 of his last 9 races all on dirt. The 2 that he lost were his grass race at Belmont Park. He didn't run badly. And then the Breeders' Cup Classic, which was run on synthetic at Santa Anita. So I just wonder whether American Rascal will eventually be better on dirt or on turf, and he'll be running against the very best turf 2-year-olds in the world at Royal Ascot.
Yeah, and the Norfolk Stakes is a win and you're in Breeders' Cup race. I believe it's for the turf sprint, though. So it's, that Curlin, I don't think you see too many Curlins show up in the Breeders' Cup turf sprint.
And we want to remind you that the TDN Writers' Room is brought to you by Keeneland. Keeneland is home of the World's Yearling Sale. The energy, magic, and momentum at the September Yearling Sale returns September 11th through the 23rd. Learn more at theworldsyearlingsale.com. We'll be right back after this message from Keeneland.
If this place could talk, it would roar. It would say, "This is racing." This beating heart in the heart of horse country, steady and strong beneath the roar, reminding us why, for the love of the horse, for generations to come.
He was just put together like a machine, and he had a great mind. Everything about him was what you'd want.
Tis the Law pops the cork in the champagne. Tis the Law is going to win the first leg of the Triple Crown.
I've never seen him get tired.
Respect the law. Tis the Law.
His structure is just perfect. His bone is perfect.
He's left the others behind. He's going to win the Run Happy Travers.
He's everything you would look for in a horse.
The TDN Writers' Room is brought to you by Coolmore. Justify was represented by his 10th 2-year-old stakes winner, Rin Ramatuli, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, won the Group 2 Prix de Bois in France on Sunday. It was her second win in 3 starts for trainer Christopher Head and her owner, the former NBA star Tony Parker. Her ultimate target this summer is the Group 1 Prix Mornay at Deauville. Also in France, Churchill's outstanding daughter, Blue Rose Sen, completed a classic double after winning the Group 1 Prix de Diane, the French Oaks at Longchamp. She had previously won the French 1,000 guineas. Well, we move along now, and let's do some off-the-track news. And I'd rather not be talking about these things all the time, but there's stories that come up, and I think that we at least have to make some passing message and ask some questions about what's going on here. What I'm talking about is Todd Pletcher. And it was announced during the week that he had still another positive. This one was a Butte positive for a horse that ran at Saratoga on July 30th of last year. At one point, he had 6 outstanding positives against him. However, one of them out of Florida has been dismissed. The split sample that was taken on the horse did not confirm the positive. But he's got 2 in New York, 2 in Florida, and 1 in Pennsylvania. And, a lot to talk about here. First of all, one of the positives for Forte in the Grade 1 hopeful stakes for Meloxicam, the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority said under their rules, this would not have been declared a positive. Todd Pletcher's not a cheater. I wouldn't even go anywhere near that. I think he's a guy who tries his very best and has a lot of integrity. But just like I might have said about Bob Baffert at the time, I do think these guys need to be more careful. And I think there's some instance of sloppiness here on behalf of anybody getting that many positives. And I think they do need to do a better job. But I also want to after I want to hear what you guys' opinions of that. I also want to get into the fact that these positives take, in some cases, nearly a year to be announced. So,
well, one of the striking things about the positive from Forte going all the way back to September at Saratoga was that it didn't come to light until about 9 months later, and it kind of has devolved into a he said, she said type of an argument with the New York State Gaming Commission on the one hand saying that Mr. Pletcher's attorneys dragged out the process, and then Mr. Pletcher's attorney came back on the other hand and said, we were trying to get information about the split sample testing from the Gaming Commission, and they were withholding it from us, allegedly. So a lot of times the truth is somewhere in the middle when you have some of these things, and you have to, I guess, as a fan or a journalist who's observing from afar, you have to have some sort of realization that this is the way that the world works when you have a public agency on the one hand trying to cover its butt, and you have a high-powered attorney who charges a good hourly rate trying to back up her client and trying to make sure that person's interests are covered. And, each one of them tries to take the existing rules in the system and use them to their best advantage. And I think that's what we see there.
Yeah, hopefully HISA will work as intended and will remove some of the delays that we've seen administratively to get these things brought to light and adjudicated, and a little more transparency involved. As far as all the multiple positives, the overages, I guess is the right word for Pletcher. Look, the way I view this, and I know some people are going to say, oh, he's an apologist for Pletcher, or he's an apologist for Baffert, or whatever. That's fine. People can say that all they want. But these thoroughbred racehorses are athletes. And as such, they'll not only get sick occasionally and require medication, but they'll need some medication to get over minor aches and pains and things like that. And as long as that's not in the horse's system on race day, it's no problem. But when you train as many horses as a Todd Pletcher does, it's inevitable that with all the things that we've seen through the years, that the metabolism different in one horse than in another horse, and sometimes medication lingers in horse A system longer than in horse B. And you've got assistant trainers at other racetracks where you're not there every day, even though it's the absolute insurer rule, and it should be. But it's inevitable that you're going to have some of these very minor ticky-tack overages that are going to pop up. And at least one of these overages, Lisa Lazarus has been quoted as saying that in HISA's new regulations, it wouldn't even be a positive to begin with. Okay, we've seen Graham Motion, for crying out loud, have a positive test due to an overage. Shug McGahee, it's going to happen to anybody. And the more horses you have, the better chance that you're going to run afoul of some of these type of situations. My biggest hope from HISA is twofold. Yeah, it's transparency and quicker adjudication, whatever. But really, number one, it's to really investigate and catch the true cheaters out there, a la Jason Service and Jorge Navarro. And number two, hopefully come up with a better way so that the average sports fan won't look at these situations from Todd Pletcher or betamethasone from Bob Baffert and say, these guys were doping their horses. They were drugging their horses. There's got to be a way for thoroughbred racing to get the message out there that that's not the situation. That's not the case. But as of right now, that's what people think about Bob Baffert, and that's what they think about Todd Pletcher and anybody else that has a, 10 picogram overage of a medication that results in a positive test.
Yeah, Randy, that's the problem. And I don't necessarily know how you change that. I mean, to educate the public would be difficult, especially when, some of the mainstream media, the New York Times, every time some of these things happen, have, headlines, horses doped, racing is dead and the whole world is coming to an end. But I want to get back into the timing thing. The positive that Pletcher just got for the Butte, the race, as I said, took place on July 30th. It was announced on June 11th. That's 316 days. And TD, you had said in the case of the hopeful Forte, each side was blaming one another for why it took so long. We haven't heard from anybody why this one took even longer. To me, I know the lawyers always want to delay. I don't necessarily know why that is the strategy, especially when you have a Butte positive. I don't know how you're ever going to get out of that. Maybe with some others when there's possible environmental contamination. But I think the buck stops with the New York Gaming Commission. They just shouldn't let that happen. They've got to step up. But the good news is they don't matter anymore in these kind of matters, because Horse Racing Integrity and Welfare Unit from HISA has taken over. And they're lumping suspensions into different categories. But look at the difference between what we had with the Butte positive, 316 days. They are now announcing what they call provisional suspensions. And here's an example. Mario Dominguez, a trainer who was caught using cobalt in a race on May 24th. On June 9th, 15 days later, this was made public on the Horse Racing Integrity and Welfare Unit website. So I think, at least from that aspect of how the game works, we're going to see definitely an improvement going forward.
Yeah, my understanding with how HISA is going to adjudicate these medication, first of all, they're not even going to call them positive tests. They're now called adverse analytical findings. And if the substance in question is an outright banned substance, as soon as the trainer is notified, it becomes public that trainer is under a provisional suspension. If it's for a controlled medication and you get an adverse analytical finding for that, the violation is only made public after the trainer either has the split sample confirmed or says, I don't want the split sample testing. I'm going to waive my right to that. So that is one change, and we will see how that evolves. You have to wonder, the great unknown in this is, of course, our legal system in this country. It won't be long before one trainer or another challenges that type of setup. And, that's going to spiral off into the courts. So even though in theory it sounds like it should put things into neat little compartments and make it easier for the public to be notified and for trainers to be notified and to be able to defend themselves, I'm just wondering when the first lawsuits start to hit and how that throws a wrench into the system, if it does.
The TDN Writers' Room is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Horse Breeders Association. The Pennsylvania Sired, Pennsylvania Bred Series for 2-year-olds is back, and it's better than ever. Now, 6 total races. The series kicks off on Monday, August 21st with a pair of $100,000 stakes. Continues Saturday, September 23 with 2 $150,000 stakes, and concludes just after Christmas, December 27th with 2 $200,000 stakes. Notice the escalating purse values, and with a combined $50,000 bonus structure to the trainer and the top 3 equine point earners. There's plenty of cash to go around. You can learn more at pabred.com.
The PA Horse Breeders Association presents the Pennsylvania Stallion Series. 6 races for PA sired, PA bred 2-year-olds at Parks. 2 $100,000 contests at 5.5 furlongs. On August 21st, PA Day at the races. September 23rd, PA Derby Day has 2 races at 6.5 furlongs, both with a $150,000 purse. And in December, 2 races going long, each worth $200,000. For more, go to pabred.com.
The fastest horse of the week is brought to you by the Fast Stallions at WinStar Farms, such as Promises Fulfilled, who combines the brilliance of a Stormcat with two-turn success. A 5-time graded stakes winner from 6 furlongs to a mile and a 16th. Remember, that mile and a 16th win was in the Fountain of Youth when he defeated 2-year-old champion Good Magic. He also went on to win the Grade 1 Allen Jerkins. Talk about speed. He led at the first call in 15 of his 17 starts, set fractions between 43.3 and 44.4 for the half mile, 6 times in graded stakes races. If speed is key, and we all know in American racing it is, then take a look at Promises Fulfilled's first yearlings, which sell this summer. Now, fastest horse of the week. A bit unusual in that it doesn't come out of a stakes race. It was last Thursday at Belmont Park in a 6-furlong turf sprint. The horse's name, Outlaw Kid, co-owned by Randy Hill and Stephen Venosa of SGV Thoroughbreds. He won that allowance sprint by 3 1/4 lengths with the Buyer's speed figure of 100. Next start for Outlaw Kid. Trainer George Weaver expected to bring him back quickly. He told me this morning that he's looking at the Highlanders Stakes at Woodbine on July the 1st because Outlaw Kid is bred in Ontario. One other little interesting thing about the horse's ownership, he originally was purchased for $220,000 by My Racehorse as a 2-year-old in Ocala in 2021. He had a throat problem at the time of sale. The deal was with My Racehorse, if the throat problem could be cleared up in 30 days, they would keep him. If it couldn't, they had the option to give him back. There were some complications. So My Racehorse bailed out of the deal. The consigner, Steve Venosa, who trains horses, consigns horses in Ocala, Florida, kept him along with Randy Hill, and now they are glad they did. Fastest horse of the week, Outlaw Kid. The TDN Writers Room brought to you by the Green Group, a tax accounting and advisory firm specializing in the thoroughbred industry and designed to save you money in taxes.
And welcome in now this week's Green Group Guest of the Week, and it's Tom Ludt. You know him from his many roles in horse racing, including his time at the Breeders' Cup in Santa Anita. And he's taken on a new venture. He's the president of horse operations for the National Thoroughbred League, which I think most everyone knows now was launched, or the announcement came out last month, about a very ambitious project to put horse racing under a league structure. And they have put out some ambitious plans and hope to do something very special for the sport of horse racing. Tom, since we last talked to you, I was just wondering if there's some new developments, some new details. And the first thing I want to know, you had said at the time that you have to go out and buy 36 horses for the league, of which 6 teams, 6 horses each. Have you started that process yet?
Well, I have a team, and as you can imagine, I have a lot of bloodstock agents that become my best friend again. So I'm getting lots of calls, and we are, quote, I guess the word would be scouting. But, you know, the challenge for me at this point is our first race is down at Kentucky Downs, which is our Nashville team. The race is actually on September 3rd. The rules of our league will be the horses, once for their purchase, only race in our league. So the long answer is I haven't bought any yet because we don't want to buy them and sit there and have to just train it for 2 months without the opportunity to race.
So, Tom, take us back to the start of this whole process, the how and even the why of how this idea got started to begin with.
Well, it was before my time, but the 2 co-founders, Randall Lane, who's the chief editor at Forbes magazine, and Bob Doherty, who's a private fund manager who lives out here in California, the 2 of them met. And it was mutually done because Bob's involved a lot with Forbes family. Those 2, and I think really the basis is Bob's looked at a lot of things for his clients from business perspectives, and obviously he's approached a lot about teams. And so those 2 were the brainstorming of why is there no race league in the horse business? So they started digging into it, and Martin Panza and Chad Brown got with those 2. So the 4 of them kind of created the concept. I'm friends with all those guys, but Martin talked me into doing this. So I came on board with the concept, and then we've developed it into what we think is going to be a really, really neat opportunity for horse racing. But the concept was formed back then, and the idea is just to really recreate an atmosphere at the track. And they're really kind of plagiarizing, if that's the right word, away from the Formula One Drive to Survive concept. When you look at it, and looking at the screen, we're all quite old, so we've been to the races many times, and we've seen, running Santa Anita, I've watched it happen daily. The crowds slowly disappear. And so the concept is create event weekends. It's not all about racing. Actually, in the very beginning this year, it'll be a lot about the activities not racing, but trying to create the atmosphere to draw people back to racing and wrapping that around with a lot of activities.
Tom, back to the horse acquisition theme. Is there going to, you're going to be acquiring 36 race-ready horses. Is there a bench depth? Will there be some reserves? What's going to happen if by attrition some horses cycle out of the stable, or in the event of race weekend there's a scratch?
Yeah, no, and let me back up. I should have corrected Bill. When I first talked to him, that's the concept. The concept is that we will have 6 active horses on the roster. We're going to have a draft. We're going to try, they're trying to create an atmosphere that's a lot more than just 3 races. So the idea is we're going to have all the owners in mid-August at a draft. It'll be obviously virtual. The horses won't be there, but we will have each team, and I'm not going to talk about the 7th team. We might have a 7th team here in the next week. You'll hear about it if it happens. But each team will have 6 active horses. I will constantly be looking, and we'll probably have really at least 4 per team on a reserve basis because of exactly that. I mean, at the end of the day, we're being put into the condition book, and we will be drawn just in the middle of a race card. So when we run our races, if we have a scratch post entry, that's just part of racing. But we are toying. I'm working with some other racing secretaries. We are toying with the idea of having a couple wild cards that get to enter each month to help field sizes first year. I mean, we originally were running at Parks and at Monmouth, so we've had to scale back our events, just startup issues, trying to get organized. So we wanted to have 8 per race minimum just to help the racetracks. Nobody wants 5-6 horse fields, so those are challenges. And boy, I'm telling you, I'm getting all kinds of challenges as a startup first year in the great horse business that loves the word change.
Right. Well, I'll have 2 questions for you because I want to get to what you just said. Tom, first of all, you had said that horses would, you'd like them to be allowance horses, maybe grade 3 type stakes horses. What is your overall budget for what you can spend to get these horses?
Well, this is one of the things, as I mentioned, about challenges of a startup. Everyone's concerned about the horses, and obviously we are. As the sport's all about the horse. So looking at this and spending a lot of time talking to trainers and even some owners and now racing partnerships, we're even looking at the option of leasing. The long-term goal is to obviously have horses that are in our control year after year, but you have to make amends or changes to suit the circumstances. And the idea is that, I'm using Thoroughgraph. I'm a big Thoroughgraph guy. So we use that as a tool because the most important part for me this first year is to have competitive races. And this is where it's been a real challenge. Talking to 3 horse guys, you'll see my frustration that I've had with these guys the first 3 months is they're all about building a sport, an event, and an activity. They don't know that 6 furlongs should be 109 versus 112 versus 113. And it's interesting going to races more and more. I spent a lot of time watching. I was at the Belmont watching the races, and it was so great to see all those young guys and girls down there on the grandstands cheering their eyeballs out for races. And they don't know a darn thing about times. And so when the race is over, to me, it's almost like I'm getting really old, I guess, but it was just great to see people screaming and hollering. And as I'm getting mad as the 8-5 crosses the finish line and I'm 3 deep in that leg. But that's what this is about. This isn't about us. Unfortunately, it's not about the 3 of you either. This is about getting the people that don't go racing. So the long answer is what's really most important is sound, healthy, good finish lines. And that's really what it comes down to, because at the end of the day, we could have gone into Manhattan that night and interviewed a lot of people, and nobody was going to say Arcangelo.
Right. So, Tom, I want to address the other thing you kind of hinted at. Since this was launched in the toxic world of social media, people haven't been very kind to you guys. And I know that you are aware of that because I saw you mentioned it in another interview that you did. Are you surprised at the negativity? And what would you tell those people to try to make them think differently about this project?
That's a really good answer to get me in trouble, isn't it? Am I surprised? I'm going to give you a longer answer than you asked. I'm surprised at the resistance and the challenges I've had with the tracks, to be honest with you. Am I surprised at the feedback on Twitter? I'm not, only because I'm not a big social media guy. I read it sometimes. And so if you get away from the horse business, I'll make a lot of enemies by saying this, but most of the people that are on Twitter that want to say negative things are people that won't look you in the eye and come up and talk to you about it. It's a startup. I've learned a lot. I've had a lot of interesting jobs. I've never been involved in something like this. So for all the people that want to knock it, they're the same people that are asking for change to save this game. Well, are we going to be perfect? We've already proven we're not perfect. We're not. We were supposed to start July 4th. But the reality of the matter is that when people spend time with me or anybody in this concept, understand this. The idea is to put people on a calendar like for Nashville weekend. Come down, and it's very much specific about the city. If you notice, we're not in some small town, even though there may be a track. We're in towns where we're hoping people will ultimately travel to, have a great time, and come to the races. And the entertainment's not going to be my kind of entertainment. I'll be the first one to tell you. I go to the racetrack, I got my form, might have a drink, and I'm focused on betting multi-leg bets. But that's not what this is about. This league is all about getting, I always use the expression, the neighbor that you've never got to go racing. This is getting them to come out and have a great time. And that introduction is a long, painful process. I mean, I literally joke about this. The tracks probably should be paying us for the experiment that we're going through, because the league is funded at 100% on our own. We put up the purse money and we let the horsemen take the handle. So the idea behind this is, how do we get people to come back out to the track like the good old days? Now, you're not going to do it every weekend, and we know that. But at the end of the day, it's ironic. I was at the Belmont this past week. I came home. I went to a Dodgers game because I'm not a baseball guy, but a lot of my friends are. And then I was at the U.S. Open on Sunday. So those are three events that some people say are boring. It's your personal choice, and we're not trying to conquer the world, but we really need that activity back at the track. We're never going to lose our degenerate gamblers and the person that's always going to watch racing. We're trying to find that new audience, and people have to understand that's not easy, and it's not going to be the way some of us want it to be done. But to the distractors, I say, well, bring on a good idea. I mean, that's okay.
So I got a couple of questions too, Tom. But first, you mentioned that you're surprised at the resistance you're getting from the racetracks. What's the nature of that resistance?
That's a good question, Randy. You know, what's so funny about it is my background. I've dealt with these tracks for so long. I don't know. They don't really want to give you a straight answer. I think it's the word change. I think people don't want it to be associated with failure. Again, this whole answer is an assumption, because I point blank asked why not, and I've really not got a direct answer. I'm fine with, Tom, we don't like you because you're fat or whatever the word is, but we've really not got a straight answer. And when you look at our concept is we come in the day of the race, we buy an extraordinary amount of tickets, we pay for the hospitality, we pay for the purses, and we bring people to the track. So I say that as the ex-president of Santa Anita. It's a brilliant idea, in my opinion. So the only thing I can tell you is I believe it's fear of change and fear that it's not going to work, which I just don't even understand the risks there personally.
Well, if it's not going to work, I mean, the thought about it not working, you mentioned how old we are. We've all been around long enough to know that the success or failure of something like this is going to come down to the bottom line. It's going to come down to money. If not a profit, then at least getting it to break even. So if you're buying the horses, if you're paying for the events, if you're paying for the purse money, where is the revenue stream going to come to pay for all this? And how much of a challenge do you see that being? Do you see that as being the number one challenge?
It's the number one challenge for me. It's funny the founders don't see it that way. And again, they're not horse people. They've put together a very conservative, what I would call aggressive budget that they don't believe will make money for the first 2.5 years. So it's well thought out, which was important to me. So the way one of the things we haven't touched on yet, and it's probably going to be, I think, the most unique, beneficial thing of this league for the industry in general. And that's this, just like Drive to Survive. I don't know if you call them a series or documentaries, but we've hired a Hollywood crew, and then we've contracted Billy Rappaport, which a lot of you guys know, to help that crew do the horse side of it. And we're going to be filming. We started filming with our little cocktail party down in Manhattan last week. We're going to be filming, and I don't know how many thousands of hours they will, to create 6 episodes. And it'll go on Netflix, Hulu, whoever they negotiate. That's not my area of expertise. But that in itself, to me, is one of the most unique, great opportunities for this game, because each episode, and we're paying for it up front and hopefully making money on the back. And the reason we're doing that is to control it. We want to be able to control the final version so that it produces horse racing in a positive light versus a negative light. And, what we'll do is we'll sprinkle in on one episode why the jockeys use whips so we can educate people. We'll have another episode that'll sprinkle in handicapping so people can look at the racing form and understand the hieroglyphics that it is to them. And, that's where my background will come in, and working with these producers is, I use the joke all the time with people. I'm at that era that I was a computer idiot. So they made that book, Computers for Dummies, that we could take home at night and read so no one saw us reading it. Well, people will be able to watch these episodes over and over and over again, like I have for Drive to Survive, to learn about Formula One racing. And I really believe that documentary is going to be the greatest tool coming out of this the first few years, because people can watch it at 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and it's a huge expense for us, but we're underwriting it because we think it's the right thing for this league. And back to your answer, through sponsorships, through ticket sales, part of the deal first year is we're giving money to the track. We hope that we'll build, and it'll be based off historical data. So if whatever Sunday we're running at your track, if you were doing $1 million and we're ultimately getting to $3 million, there's rev shares on excess profits. But through sponsorships and the ticket sales, and they think this documentary will make a lot of money. They think they can outrun that in the appreciation of the team values.
Tom, your first event is coming up. It's going to come up fairly quickly. It's going to be on the Labor Day weekend at Kentucky Downs. That will be the Nashville event. And, let's assume that you have piqued the interest of some people who might want to be interested in coming out to that for the weekend. What do they pay, and what do they get that's different from just coming in for general admission? Good question, and unfortunately, somewhat of a long answer. You guys know me; I'm a horse guy, so I will tell you the reason it's a long answer. It's a little bit going back to Randy's question of the details. So we have an event team, we have a marketing team, we have a social media team. I joked with them. I said, we might want to talk to Breeders' Cup. We might be able to take over running Breeders' Cup. We got so many members of our team. But that's part of their history and their background of trying to build success. The great news is I can't screw those things up because I'm not involved in those. I'm involved in the horses and the managing of the racing. But, at the end of the day, they're booking an act, and we're running late. There's no doubt about that. I sit on these Zoom calls, and I guess I can be an expert since I listen to these guys talk a lot. But we're booking events. We may have a big name in Nashville. It may be just a good name. I don't know the difference. But so there will be that event Saturday night. The races are Sunday. I'll give you the walkthrough of Labor Day. So Friday night is an owner's dinner. It's our first event. Saturday, there's going to be some activities in Nashville. You get to pick the city. And then that night, there's a concert. And then Sunday's racing. Sunday's racing, it's challenging for those who have been to Kentucky Downs. We've rented the chalets from Kentucky Downs, and we'll have picket fence put up for our general admission group. And they'll have activities, and they'll be creating activities. This is the thing that I struggle with because I'm a horse guy, but they're going to create activities to keep people entertained between racing, because at the end of the day, that's the challenge that the non-horse group that I work with sees as the issues with horse racing, is that gap between racing. And, that's just something that they're working on. But, again, it's also price sensitive. So if you're in the VIP section, it's drinks and food included. The general admission's obviously general admission, but it's relatively inexpensive. It's hopefully just building that atmosphere so that people come in groups. As you know, it's always more fun to be at any event with your friends than without. That's Nashville, and each event will build upon. I mean, one quick answer we'll probably get to, but Tampa, I thought this was really interesting, and I give them a lot of credit. I voted against it, but I got outvoted. They moved our event to New Year's Eve. They think that'll be a fun blowout weekend for our championship, and it's New Year's Eve. We were supposed to run earlier in the month, so they wanted to move to that weekend. We agreed to it, and we hope it all works out because it'll be a championship weekend on New Year's Eve.
Tom, one more question for me before we let you go. I want to get back to what you're talking about, the various experiences and ticket prices. Right now, the only one on your website that you are selling tickets to and have prices posted is for Kentucky Downs. You have two packages. One is a VIP package for $395. The other is a general admission for $95. You told us a lot about the what the VIPs would get. But if I'm a guy who just has been going to Kentucky Downs for the last 7-8 years, I'm not really interested in this. I just want to go to the races, and I don't believe there's any admission charge to Kentucky Downs, and this would be for all your tracks. Will any fan have to pay that $95 to go to the races?
Yeah, no, we are reserving areas. So like the average, the guys don't like me to say this, but the truth is if you walk in to any of our events as a regular bettor and you don't know how to read conditions, it's just a race. So we're not impacting the actual day and the regular race customer. We're trying to create our own section, I guess, if you'd say. And real quick on Meadowlands, I think that's going to be a really, really neat one. We've tied in with the New York Food and Wine Festival. So we have 20 celebrity chefs come to the track that night. And that gets into the concept that we have to understand. There's one thing we all do is we eat. So hopefully we're bringing people in for a food event. And oh, by the way, enjoy racing. Because we're going to be trying to be very educational. We're going to be very concentrated in our spaces to make sure we're there educating people. And that's where the themes will roll out. And again, we're behind. It's a startup. We're running around with our heads cut off. But I think as you see this thing grow and develop, I think you're going to really see a neat pattern of events based off the town. Obviously, Nashville is going to be country. Meadowlands is going to be food. And we'll keep building on that.
Very good. Well, Tom Ludt, thanks so much for joining us today on the TDN Writers Room, and best of luck with the National Thoroughbred League. We really look forward to what's going to develop in the next couple months, especially that list of horses. Can't wait for that to come out and see who are going to be making up the team. So, Tom, thanks for your time, and again, best of luck with this very interesting new venture in thoroughbred racing.
Thanks, guys.
As the Green Group Guest of the Week, Tom Ludt will receive a free 1-hour tax consultation with the Green Group. For more information about how the Green Group can help you, once again, the URL, www.greenco.com. We'll be right back after this message from the Green Group.
Are you paying too much in taxes? The Green Group can help. There's a reason the most successful owners, breeders, and horsemen select the Green Group as their tax advisors. They save you money and share successful strategies. Over the past 40 years, the Green Group founder, Len Green, has owned and bred some of the best racehorses in the history of the sport, like Eclipse Award-winning champions Jaywalk and Wonderwheel. His DJ stable competes at the highest level and has received the game's most prestigious honors. Len Green's in-depth, hands-on industry knowledge, combined with cutting-edge tax-saving strategies, has produced positive results for his clientele and has made the Green Group the top-rated accounting and tax firm in the thoroughbred business. For a confidential and complimentary consultation, contact us at 732-634-5100 or visit our website at www.greenco.com. The Green Group, proven strategies to save you taxes.
Introducing Giftbox, winner of the Grade 1 Santa Anita Handicap. He's a 3-time graded stakes winning millionaire with 4 triple-digit buyers and a 4 Ragazin to his name. He proved himself early as a graded stakes place 2-year-old, and now his career as a stallion is just getting started. From the first crop of the leading sire Twirling Candy out of a multiple graded stakes producing mare. Giftbox, only at Lane's End.
The Lane's End Stallion of the Week is Giftbox. Giftbox is a Grade 1 and 3-time graded stakes winner who raced from 2 to 6. In 2019, Giftbox was among the leading older horses in America after a string of graded stakes performances that included a Grade 1 victory in the Santa Anita Handicap. He joined his sire, Twirling Candy, and his grandsire, Candy Ride, at Lane's End. Look for Giftbox's first yearlings at the sales this summer. Okay, so some more off-the-track news. It involves Safi Joseph, and we all know his problems around Derby time, and he was at one point banned by the Churchill Downs. And then NYRA never really was very specific about what they were doing with him, but it appeared that they had, told him that he wasn't welcome for a while. The reason why, I would imagine, why DeBerrio was transferred from Safi Joseph to Rick Dutrow. NYRA has lifted its or quote unquote ban against Safi Joseph. They've given him 23 stalls at Saratoga, and he has a horse nominated to this weekend's Wild Applause. I have no problem with this whatsoever. First of all, you in order, it's terrible what happened to these horses, but unless you can prove that he did something to contribute to their deaths, I don't think you can penalize him. In the short run, maybe as Churchill Downs wanted to take a quick look at this and didn't want to have anything, crazy and tragic happen with the Kentucky Derby. Now, what's also interesting is only one of the two necropsies of the horses that died, best of my knowledge, has been released. That necropsy showed absolutely nothing wrong. The second one, I assume, will be the same. The necropsies almost never come up with anything. So I don't think we'll ever know what happened to these horses. But, the process, you can't hang this guy out on just what ifs and circumstantial evidence. And we'll see what happens with Safi Joseph. 23 stalls will be active at Saratoga.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as the law has proven and judges have held it up legally, Churchill Downs can do whatever it wants to do. Churchill Downs doesn't have to they can act in its own best interest, doesn't have to necessarily act in what other people might consider to be a fair and even-handed manner. They can do what they think is best for Churchill Downs Incorporated. So we'll see how they choose to deal with this going forward. But I agree with you, Bill. I mean, if the necropsies don't necessarily show anything conclusive, but they show, as the one did, that there were no illegal medications involved, then I don't know how you can really penalize Safi Joseph going forward without any real due cause.
Penalization, no, but I think in 2023, in the racing world that we live in now, you have to expect that if you have two horses have sudden deaths within 72 hours of each other, on one of the biggest stages in the sport, Kentucky Derby Week, you should expect a different level of scrutiny.
So speaking of Safi Joseph, he had intended to run Lord Miles in the Kentucky Derby, and he's one of the horses that got caught up in the in the mess with Safi Joseph and how Churchill Downs dealt with it. He now hasn't run since the Wood Memorial, but he's back on Saturday in the Ohio Derby. And I gotta tell you, you think of the Ohio Derby as a second or third tier race among the three-year-olds. It's pretty darn good. Two Phils will be the favorite after running second in the Kentucky Derby, and this will be his first start since then for trainer Larry Revilli. And how about Bishop's Bay, trained by Brad Cox? Last time out, he ran second in the Peter Pan, and who beat him that day? Arcangelo, who came back to win, of course, the Belmont Stakes. We mentioned Lord Miles, who was a huge upset winner of the Wood Memorial, and Hay Strike for Kenny McPeak. Won the Texas Derby last time out, a race nobody saw because of those silly rules in Texas that cut off all simulcasting. So pretty good race. Randy, TD, I'll take a deeper dive into it a little bit later in the week, but I'd imagine Two Phils would win this one and move on from there to maybe the Travers or something like that.
Well, I'll go head to head with you on your Two Phils there. I've been, I think a lot of people had Bishop's Bay on their stable watch list after what he did in the Peter Pan Stakes. And, I had him on my watch list even before Arcangelo came back to win the Belmont Stakes. I thought that Bishop's Bay ran the better race within the race that day. He got hooked into a speed duel, took heat on the front end, and then when Arcangelo came after him, don't forget there was a spot, perhaps a 16th of a mile from the finish, where Bishop's Bay was back in front by half a length. I put him on my list. Now, of course, Arcangelo, the world has seen what he has done, and I actually think that he'll be favored over Two Phils in the Ohio Derby.
All right, TD, I'll make you two bets, $1 each. One, that Two Phils will be favored over your horse, and then two, that my horse finishes ahead of you. You game for that? $2.
That's stretching the limit of my usual bankroll, but I think I'm going to go out on a limb and take you up on that.
Okay. Or we share a beer at Fenway Park next time we go to a Red Sox game. Or you buy the beers.
So that's a real cost increase.
Yeah, that's $20 or $30. So.
Sounds like the dollar bets that Jerry Bailey and I make against each other during the telecast. That's what horse racing is all about, a difference of opinion. Look, after the Kentucky Derby, I said on the air before the Preakness, and I stick with it now, Two Phils was the best horse in the Kentucky Derby. Given the pace And the way he was the only horse to race that close to the pace to stick around, and not only did he stick around, he looked like he might be a winner at the 3/16 pole. I loved the way he ran in the Kentucky Derby, and I think he'll be. I think he'll be the favorite as well. I did really like Bishop's Bay's race in the Peter Pan. The fractions were pretty soft in that race, so he was hooked into a speed duel, but he got the benefit of a pretty easy pace in that situation, which helped him. It didn't necessarily help Arcangelo. But I think the horse has got a world of talent, and he's going in the right direction. It's Brad Cox with another one of these 3-year-olds that are really on the ascend right now. So I think it's going to be a 2-horse race, and I think it's going to be an outstanding race, and I can't wait to see what happens. But I like Two Phils.
I will say one thing in favor of Two Phils, however. There's a difference between tiring and quitting. Now, he was tiring at the end of the Kentucky Derby, but he was not quitting. You know, he wasn't going to throwing in the towel in that race. And the horse we're not talking about, even though we led off with him, Lord Miles for Safi Joseph. You know, he was the 59-1 upsetter of the Wood Memorial. That race hasn't come back to be very productive. 6 horses have run back out of it, and only 1 has hit the winner's circle,
which has been the case with the Wood Memorial for the last several years. Another story, and it's just the latest sad chapter in the very sad story of Arlington Park. And they're moving on now, and they're getting serious. The machines and the cranes and the wrecking balls came out last week, and they started tearing down the grandstand. Not that we didn't know this wasn't going to happen. There was not going to be a 11th hour reprieve for Arlington Park. But you think of this just gorgeous racetrack, and now it's being reduced to rubble so that they can build a stadium for the Chicago Bears. I think that's the only way to put it. It's very sad.
Very, very sad. I thought it was the best racing facility in the United States, and I know people will say what they want. There are a lot of strong opinions out there about Churchill Downs Incorporated and its role in this whole saga, and what makes it even more sad, Bill, is that the Bears may not even wind up building the stadium there. It's not a done deal. And as a matter of fact, according to the media in Chicago, momentum is building for the Bears to stay in a once again remodeled Soldier Field rather than take this, this property that they bought where Arlington Park is. So it'll be really tragic if they tear down Arlington Park and nothing becomes of it in the way of a new SoFi-type stadium in Arlington Heights.
It's a bargaining chip, unfortunately. It's a beautiful racing showcase that's been reduced to it's going to be reduced to rubble, but it's already been reduced to a bargaining chip. The Bears buy that piece of property so they can have some negotiating leverage with the stadium elsewhere, perhaps in downtown Chicago, to remain there. And hey, if they end up getting a lucrative downtown stadium deal, they've got this parcel of real estate that they can still sell. It's an investment that's going to appreciate over time. I think, another sad aspect of this is Arlington. We can wax as sentimentally as we want to about Arlington and its demise. However, Hawthorne and Fairmount, racinos have been legal in Illinois since 2019. Now, that didn't mean that they were going to be up and running within a couple of months there, but now we're already 4 years long in the tooth since that legislation enabled racinos to be active, and neither track has it, and neither track has that revenue stream coming in from the racinos.
Yeah, Illinois racing desperately needs to move on and get going on that. And I frankly don't understand what the big delays are, but hopefully someday soon. But, it's also, too, it's sad that, horse racing is so dependent on casinos. Shouldn't a racetrack in Chicago, the second biggest city in the country, do great business and be profitable on its own? But we've gotten to the point where, racing in so many places just can't make it without slot machines and casino revenues. And that in and of itself is another story, but also I think a very troubling and sad story. But anyway.
The XBTV Work of the Week belongs to Ida, the Bob Baffert trainee, who on Sunday worked 5 furlongs in 59.40 seconds. Ida has had a very interesting career arc. She was a Grade 1 winner as a 2-year-old at Los Alamitos in the Starlet Stakes. Then she came back, early 3-year-old year in March and won the Santa Isabel at Santa Anita. Then a 14-month layoff until she returned to competition in late April at Santa Anita with an allowance victory. Now, she's had 3 sharp works back in June, preparing for her next start, which Baffert says will likely be back at Los Alamitos in the Great Lady M Stakes, scheduled for July the 4th. Ida, the XBTV Work of the Week. We'll be right back after this message from XBTV.
All the thrills. Fraction of the bills. Experience the power of the partnership. Change your life, make new friends, and compete at the highest level of thoroughbred racing. West Point Thoroughbreds, the gold standard in racing partnerships. Visit westpointtb.com.
The TDN Writers Room is also brought to you by West Point Thoroughbreds. Joining a West Point partnership can vault you into the world of instant camaraderie. Here's some interesting West Point starters to look forward to. There's Mount Up, a $400,000 Saratoga yearling buy. He'll make his second lifetime start for Todd Pletcher. That'll be on Thursday at Belmont Park. He was second on debut last October. Has been working well. July the 8th, also a big day for West Point. 3 horses running in stakes races at tracks around the country. Vava goes in the victory ride at Belmont. That's a grade 3. Cagliostro, I got to get that name right. Cagliostro is pointing for the Indiana Derby, and Giant Game will run in the Cornhusker. That's another grade 3. That one will be at Prairie Meadows.
Well, that's a wrap on this week's show. I want to thank my cohorts, Randy Moss, T.D. Thornton, filling in this week for Zoe Cabin. He'll be back next week as well. Tom Ludt, our Green Group guest of the week, our co-producers, Katie Petruniak and Anthony LaRocca, and our editors, Aaliyah LaRocca and Nathan Wilkinson. And somewhere, where's Lucy?
She's still on the floor.
Oh my! Well, we know she's back there somewhere, and our mascot, Lucy. Talk to you guys next week. Thanks for tuning us in for the TDN Riders and Podcast.